Welcome to AI Dispatch, your channel for the latest AI videos on YouTube. If you don't want to miss these updates, please like, subscribe, and share. Ray Dalio sits down with All In Podcast to deliver a series of arguments that systematically dismantle conventional economic wisdom. His framework suggests AI companies may generate zero profit, taxation and inflation are functionally identical, and nearly half the American workforce depends on government spending. Each claim operates through historical pattern recognition spanning 500 years, revealing structural contradictions that Wall Street refuses to acknowledge. Imagine the most transformative technology of this generation producing no profit for American corporations. Ray Dalio argues this outcome is not only possible, but may be structurally inevitable, and his reasoning centers on a geopolitical chess match with China. Dalio's credibility on this topic stems from his analytical methodology. He has constructed a framework examining long-term historical cycles extending 500 years back, using this temporal depth to identify 5 intertwined forces currently shaping global economics and geopolitics. This extended historical lens allows him to detect recurring patterns that short-term analysis consistently misses. Wall Street currently prices AI as a high-margin product category. Dalio observes that China approaches AI through a fundamentally different lens, as public infrastructure comparable to electricity or water systems. His thesis, China's strategic play could involve releasing state-of-the-art AI models as free, open-source tools to maximize national productivity gains. If a major global power treats AI as a public utility rather than a proprietary asset, the profit margins sustaining Silicon Valley's AI valuations could evaporate instantly. Superior technology does not guarantee superior returns when competitors distribute equivalent capabilities at zero cost. Market forces could consume the business model entirely. Dalio presents an economic redefinition that collapses the boundary between taxation and inflation. A detail from the interview reveals Dalio's intellectual discipline. When questioned about federal workforce changes, he explicitly stated he had not studied the numbers and therefore could not comment. This strict reliance on data before forming conclusions makes his confident positions on topics he has researched particularly credible. Economists and policymakers categorize inflation and taxation as separate phenomena. Dalio argues they are operationally identical, both measured through their impact on purchasing power. When bread prices rise, disposable income declines. When government tax rates increase, disposable income declines. The household experiences the same net effect, reduced buying capacity. By maintaining this artificial separation, economists obscure the true cost burden on citizens. When governments raise taxes to service debt they cannot otherwise pay, that functions as wealth confiscation through a different mechanism than currency devaluation, but with identical consequences. Current inflation metrics systematically undercount the actual economic pressure households face. Dalio introduces a statistic that fundamentally redefines the American economic structure. The magnitude of this structural problem produced a moment of understated humor. When the host described implementing reform as structurally difficult, Dalio responded with deadpan brevity. What an understatement. The line captured the near impossibility of addressing the underlying issue. The United States is commonly understood as a private enterprise economy. Dalio's analysis reveals that approximately half the American population now works directly for government entities, government agencies, or contractors funded by public spending. This blurs the distinction between public and private sectors beyond recognition. When 50% of the workforce depends on government expenditure, the system exhibits structural rigidity that makes spending cuts politically impossible without mass unemployment among voters. The issue transcends bureaucratic inefficiency. It represents a locked-in configuration that prevents fiscal adjustment. This gridlock informs Dalio's position on Bitcoin versus gold, which contradicts the crypto community's central thesis. Dalio's perspective on these assets is grounded in a specific analytical method. He tracks physical asset holdings, particularly among central banks, to assess supply-demand dynamics and risk. His conclusions derive from observing actual capital flows rather than theoretical arguments. The prevailing narrative positions Bitcoin as digital gold, the ultimate protection against state control. Dalio acknowledges the technology but argues central banks will never adopt Bitcoin as a reserve asset due to its transparency. Bitcoin transactions are traceable, which sovereign nations seeking to avoid sanctions or surveillance cannot accept. Gold, by contrast, has appreciated roughly 80%, while Bitcoin has stagnated or declined over the same period, demonstrating that institutional capital favors untraceability. Dalio defines gold as the only financial asset that is not a counterparty liability. Stocks, bonds, and currency represent promises from external parties. Gold requires no such promise. In an environment where institutional commitments are breaking down, this physical metal functions as the most sophisticated wealth preservation technology available. When comparing the two asset classes, Dalio distilled his position into a single declarative statement. There is only one gold. The line reflects his conviction in the metal's unique, historically validated properties. Dalio's most controversial claim addresses the political trajectory of the United States. The host observed Dalio's self-description as non-ideological, comparing his approach to that of a mechanic focused on diagnosing systems and generating returns rather than advancing political preferences. This framing raises a critical question. Does Dalio's forecast reflect political bias, or is it the dispassionate assessment of a technician observing a failing system? Conventional wisdom holds that compromise and dialogue resolve political polarization. Dalio argues the United States has entered stage 5 of the internal order cycle, defined by irreconcilable divisions where mob dynamics dominate decision-making. His prescription creates immediate tension. He suggests the dysfunction may not resolve through democratic processes, but through a strong leader who imposes order by breaking established norms. Drawing parallels to the collapse of the Roman Republic, he suggests that when a system becomes sufficiently indebted and paralyzed, historical patterns indicate a transition towards centralized authority that forces through reforms a divided legislature would never approve. This assessment positions current gridlock not as a temporary malfunction, but as a terminal condition historically resolved through non-democratic consolidation. Dalio concludes with a specific portfolio allocation directive: hold between 5 and 15% in gold, not as speculation, but as the sole insurance instrument that functions when the structural assumptions underpinning the rest of the financial system fail. If you're interested in the video featured in this episode, click the link below to watch the original.